Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have the third part of my June wrap-up. The ninth book that I read in June was Mr. Paradise by Elmore Leonard. At Christmas, you might all remember that we watched Valdez is Coming at home, and immediately I went out to the charity shop, found some Elmore Leonard, brought them home, read one of them, intended to read more. This month, Valdez is Coming came into my shop, as well as Mr. Paradise. I have Valdez is Coming on a shelf behind me. But instead of reading that book, which was the whole thing that started this off, I read Mr. Paradise. And I read the whole thing. I read half of it after work, and then I read the rest of it the next day when I was off. It's a brilliant book. It's straightforward crime fiction, and throughout the entirety of it I thought that the Coen brothers could have made a film like this because it reminded me so much of The Big Lebowski and Fargo and those sorts of films. There's probably more. I don't know what I'm talking about. I've seen limited films. I don't watch films. Anyway, Mr. Paradise follows... well, it begins with two girls and they're models and they're going to dress up as cheerleaders and dance for this 80-something-year-old gentleman, Mr. Paradiso. At the end of the night, two people are dead and the detectives are called in. And what I liked about this book was that the criminals were stupid. There's no way about it. The criminals in this book are incredibly stupid, and it added some humour to it. The detectives saw through them straight away, and you weren't left with any sort of dramatic irony because the detectives were figuring it out as the criminals were doing it, and you all just knew that what was going to happen happened. And basically this book was just what I needed. Once again, because I was reading Words of Radiance, I just needed something short, something snappy, something that I could just consume and then give away again, which is exactly what's going to happen to this book, because that's what happens to most of the crime fiction I read. I read it once and give it away. But Elmore Leonard is a truly fantastic writer. I read Mr. Majestic at the end of last year, no relation to this book, and I just find that he just writes straightforward prose. It's, once again, it's by... I'd say that it's by no means mind-blowing, but I think that it is mind-blowing in its simplicity and its straightforwardness, and I like that the dialogue is snippy and you can imagine these people saying these things. And I like that he gives you the essence of the story, everything you need within the story, and then it ends. You've got nothing... it's nothing awry. Everything's tied up in the end. It's just straightforward fiction that it's a bit mindless, and it's... I was watching the BookTube SFF Awards wrap-up, and is it Thomas said that he mentioned potato chip books that you know what you're getting, but it doesn't stop them being enjoyable at all, even if they are predictable. And that's what I got here, and I am very glad to have read the book, and it has left me wanting to read more Elmore Leonard, so I guess it did its job really. I also finally finished reading Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I listened to these books. Well, I listened to the first book because it's so heavy, and I've listened to this book because it's so heavy. I listened to it at 2.5 speed throughout, and then listened to it at triple speed towards the end, and it still took me the majority of 3 months to listen to, because I listen to it when I'm at work, before anyone else gets there. And sometimes I just had to stop, because Lord, it is a long book and I need a break. And I understand my friend Lindsay read this book and she'd read it in like 2 days, she just didn't stop. And I understand that really serious fantasy readers probably read this incredibly quickly and have it done in a week. I'm not one of those people. And there was a lot to think about in this book. Now, this is the second book in the Stormlight Archives, so I can't really mention anything without spoiling the first book in certain ways. I will say that still, the flaming shard plate and the way people acquire it reminds me of the Power Rangers. Not gonna lie, the ending of the book did have me sending a message regarding the Power Rangers again, because it reminded me of them. Throughout the whole thing, that's what I imagined when people were putting the flaming shard plate on and going to fight Parshman and the Parshendi. That was the image that was conjured in my head. I think throughout the book, you can see Sanderson's influences throughout fantasy, and I am constantly astounded by the depth and the breadth of his world building, because he has created an entire separate universe. This planet has a completely different ecosystem, and the magic system is something to wonder over. However, I can understand why people will get annoyed with this series, because to me, and I'm very sorry to Lindsay for saying this, there is no justification for a book being 1,070 something pages long when the story doesn't really do anything. Like, I just don't understand the necessity to have books this long and nothing to really be happening in them. Although you are learning a lot about the world, I'm just not really sure why, after 2,000 and something pages of reading it, we're only just at the position we are in. I understand that he has to do a lot of world building. I understand he's talking about racism and religion and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But where this character was supposed to be quite witty and funny, Shalon I'm talking about here, I don't find that funny. And Kaladin from the first book, the way he was going in this book, I was like, you really haven't changed that much. We're 2,000 pages in. What's happening here? And Adolin and Dalinar, yeah, great. Thanks, nice to know that you exist. Nice to make me angry about being a rich apologist. I hate that sort of thing. I really hated a conversation that Shalon had with Kaladin in this book. I hated it so much, especially when you found out a bit of Shalon's history and the conversation she'd had with Kaladin. I got really annoyed because you see it happening so much in fiction nowadays, and I'll go into it in another book I'm going to review, in that you have a rich person who is a nice rich person and doesn't understand why the poor people don't like him. Well, it's just because you're one of many, and yes, you might be a good one, but you're still not doing all you can to help. I found out that the third book's coming out in November, and I do intend to listen to that book as well. I do think that it's a good series. I appreciate what Sanderson's trying to do as a writer, but there are just things within this book that really frustrated me, and it took me 3 months to read. And yes, sometimes I got bored, sometimes I just gave up listening to it because I just could not care about the world at times. And I finished it just to say that I'd finished it, really. I guess I'm just not the biggest fan of this series. I'm also planning on maybe doing a discussion video about Words of Radiance where I will go into spoilers and talk about it more. But I'm just not sure whether it's necessary. If you want it, ask for it. If you don't want it, tell me. Won't do it. Save me some time. Next, we have Angel Catbird, story by Margaret Atwood, and then let's just read the names. Then we have Johnny Christmas and Tamara Bonvillain. One of them was the illustrator, one of them was the colorist. This book is a superhero origin story of a man who spills something and splices his genes with an owl and a cat, you know, to go in with the whole owl and the pussycat thing. Margaret Atwood's trying to make some jokes. She tries to do satire sometimes. For me, it just doesn't work. I have read Oryx and Crake. I have made this month I read 100 pages of The Blind Assassin, 50 pages of The Handmaid's Tale, and I'm beginning to think that me and Margaret Atwood, she's another writer I'm just never going to get on with. I think that's perfectly okay, because this book, hated this book. This book is supposedly £17. I think I paid £12 for it. And even now I think that's too much, because I finished this book within 20 minutes. It's a graphic novel. Throughout it you get little tidbits of information about cats and trying to, you know, be kind to cats and all that sort of thing. But it's a lot of money for a story that you're going to have to keep paying more money for in these hardback volumes, and really it's not worth it, because I understand what she's trying to do with the origin story, but I would have much preferred a thicker volume, probably paperback, that would have told more of the stories. There's every chance that's coming. I just wouldn't waste any more money on it because it was cliche, and she can say it was satire, she can say it's pastiche, parody, everything. I didn't like it. Next I have Varmints by Alan Ward and Mark Crast, or Crast, I don't know how you say it. This book came into the charity shop and I asked if I could borrow it straight away, believing it was going to be this really long graphic novel. Well, it made it look like it was going to be a long graphic novel because it comes in this hardcover slipcase. It says it's a limited edition for £25 and I'd finished it in 10 minutes. Once you've taken the slipcase off, you get left with this book, which admittedly does have very beautiful illustrations in it, and it is probably worth keeping for the artwork alone. But I have limited space on my shelves and I'm glad I only borrowed it because I don't know whether this became a series or anything. People could tell me more about it. Once again, I was just trying to read thinner books this month because of reading slumps and that huge tome. But I guess you are paying £25 for the production of this book and how nice it looks, and I'm not really, it's a nice little story, this little almost fairy tale thing of these moles who when their world has been developed upon, they are now left on their, let's just cover the whole thing. So their world has been developed upon and there is one of the moles is like growing some sort of plant in order that he might bring some plants back to the world. I don't know. I enjoyed looking at the artwork, but it's probably definitely going back to the charity shop tomorrow. Finally, we have The Invisible Kingdom by Rob Ryan. Again, I looked inside this, it looked really nice. I thought that it was going to be either like the gigantic beard that was evil or some other form of like graphic novel or one of these really nice picture books, and yeah, it's got too many words and it does the whole rich apologist thing again. So you have this prince who is lonely and so he decides to start escaping the castle once he is made king. He doesn't get to see his dying father, and then there is just some really weird cliche moments between the prince and the bootman, and then you get to read all this artwork, and it was, with the amount of text in here, it did take me longer than usual to read the book, but I didn't think it was that good. And then there's no resolution to the story at all, and you get told that there's 2 more volumes, but I don't care enough for 2 more volumes. I hate the idea of rich people who go out and they look upon poor people as though they are meant to be admired, as though they are doing something great when they're just living their lives, and I hate that. I hate that they start looking at the working class and poorer people as though they are in a zoo, and I cannot care for that story at all. And that's all this does, and I understand that he was lonely, I get that, but you could have had a poor person who was lonely. I was a poor person that was lonely, so I don't want them telling my story. That's not what I'm saying. I just don't care for this sort of thing where someone who has everything in the world is lonely, and it might just be me, other people may really enjoy this story, but I'm just not the person for it. I also don't think that the writing, if we were looking at this as a separate entity of just the writing, would be strong enough for people to go and read the next 2 volumes in the story, because it's not good, and I can kind of sense where the story will go in the end. And yeah, so this is going back to the charity shop as well, although there is some great artwork in here. It's a very well packaged book. It's just a really poor story. And them's the books. I realise that I didn't actually care for many of the books I read this month, which probably means I have very little taste. Not sorry about it, just thought I'd let you know. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the last 3 parts of this wrap up. It happened last month. Will it happen again this month? Probably. If you have read any of these books and would like to discuss them, please feel free to do so in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.